Hi, this is David Dickens, and today we are going to discuss some of the most common questions that we get in our office, a lot of times from new clients. And this is really about turning the question that they ask on their head and try to make it a better question that really gets to the answer that they're looking for. I hope you find something in here just exactly what you need. I'll go get Walter, and we'll get started.
Hey, we're back for another edition of Cover Your Assets KC. Walter Storholt alongside David Dickens, President, Wealth Advisor of Creative One Advisors Group, based out of Overland Park in the Kansas City area, but serving clients, beyond those boundaries, of course, from wherever you are. Welcome to the show, and we're looking forward to another great conversation today. We have on the docket 5 questions that smart people ask in retirement planning. And this is, like you said, David, where we kind of turn things on their head just a little bit. Like, hey, here's a common question, but how can we change it just a little bit to squeeze some more value out of these questions? And I think this is going to be really fun.
Well, I think so too. A lot of what we do for work is answer people's questions. And sometimes it's important to maybe lead them to a slightly different question, kind of the question behind the question. What are they really trying to get at?
I like that.
And when you've heard so many questions for so many years, you kind of pretty much hope you understand what do they really want to get from the answer I'm getting ready to give them. So hopefully we tee up a bunch of those today and give some good answers to some good questions. Yeah,
it's kind of the basic question, and then how can we make it the advanced question for more out of it? So this is not a dumb question and then, the better question. This is just making that common question a little better. So let's get into one, and I think people will get the idea here, David. The first one on our list is, how much money do I need to have saved in order to retire? I'm sure you get that one all the time, right?
We get that all the time. And what we've found is really the better question, that they may not realize that they're asking it because they don't want to run short in their retirement. But the real question is, how much income will I need in retirement? And how much savings do I have to give me that income? So they're parallel, but it's a different approach to answering the same question. So what we always try to get people to do is we say, well, that depends on what kind of retirement you want. And so a lot of times in first and second meetings, we ask them to visualize their retirement, the lifestyle that they want. And then we put together I'm going to loosely call it a retirement budget. And people a lot of times flinch when you say budget because it feels restrictive, but really it's instructive so that they can see, well, what would that lifestyle cost me in today's dollars? And then our models put forth an inflation value so that they really know, how much is this going to cost me? And then what's a prudent amount that I can take out of my savings to make that work? Then the simple math is, am I saving enough to afford the retirement that I want? So retirement income typically takes 3 different forms. Social Security, if you're married, that's 2 Social Securities. Some people, although a declining number, also have a pension. And so between those sources of income, that's going to cover, I have a couple of clients where that covers all of their retirement needs. Well, then they got a big pot of money that they saved up, and they're super happy because they don't really need the money that they saved up. But way more of my clients, their Social Security and pension or lack thereof means that they have a shortfall, and that shortfall has to come out of what they've saved for retirement. No big deal. That's why you saved it for retirement. But the amount of that difference is going to instruct how you invest your funds in retirement. So as we always try to preface all of our comments by, none of this is investment or retirement advice for you specifically. What we're trying to do is give some thoughts so that you can think through this. If you're a do-it-yourselfer, then think through it with yourself. If you already have an advisor, then maybe these are better questions that you can ask that person. So how do you invest in retirement? Well, if you're a generally low-risk person, that generally turns into low returns, but it also ends up being usually low volatility. So much more predictable what your portfolio will spin off in income. If you have a higher risk tolerance, you're likely to have a higher risk portfolio in retirement, which usually means higher returns. But it also almost always comes with higher volatility. And when you're putting together that retirement portfolio, what you want to make sure of is that the volatility attributes that you're building into your portfolio match your risk tolerance.
Very key pieces of information on that one, and you can see why that's such a common question, but also why we really need to dig a little bit further on it. So love twisting that one on its head just a little bit. Next one's a good one, David. Do you have people come into your office and ask this question commonly? Something along the lines of, hey, should I get long-term care insurance or just roll the dice? They kind of view this as a very binary thing, right?
They do. It probably only comes up maybe half the time, and oftentimes we are the people that bring it up just to see how they feel about this topic. So I can think of 4 different options of covering long-term care expenses or partially covering them. So a lot of my clients view themselves as self-insuring against the need for long-term care. And I'll break that down in just a second. Some, very few, but some actually have a long-term care policy. And, some paid it off in, 10 equal payments over 10 years when they were working. Some are still paying premiums, which unfortunately tend to go up every year or every couple of years, and it becomes increasingly less affordable. But a long-term care policy is another way. Some use permanent life insurance because if you get the right policy, you can have an accelerated death benefit, which if you get into a place where you need long-term care, you can accelerate the death benefit, meaning that your spouse or your heirs won't get that death benefit, but you will have it to pay your long-term care expenses. And then we have a number of clients that have used some sort of annuity product with something usually called a home health care doubler or some sort of feature that they pay for. There's a fee for this, but they pay for that feature and it provides extra income if they qualify. And that qualification usually is you can't do 2 of the 6 activities of daily living. Those 6 aren't things that some insurance company thought up. If you Google activities of daily living, you're going to see what those 6 are. And we've talked about them in prior podcasts. So in that discussion, probably the biggest question that we come up with is, well, if I'm going to self-insure, how much is this long-term care going to cost me if I need it when I'm in my, let's say, late 70s or early 80s? So 3 different kinds: independent living, which usually means moving to a senior living place, but having your own apartment, cooking, sometimes you cook meals, usually they provide them. That's lesser expensive than if you need an assisted living situation where you have people coming in and helping you do things. And then if you need nursing care, that means you're probably later on in your lifespan. Maybe you're getting close to the end, but the care is much more expensive. So nursing care easily costs $100,000 a year in Kansas. So it's a nice round number, so let's just use that. And if you're 65 today, and let's just say that you're going to need nursing care when you're 85, so 20 years to go. If you use the rule of 72, which we've also talked about a number of times in the podcast, and if a nursing care grows, it inflates at 7.2% a year. I'm doing this so the math is easy. But using the rule of 72, if this cost of nursing care increases by 7.2% a year, the cost of that is going to double every 10 years. So if it costs $100,000 a year now, in 10 years, it should cost about $200,000 a year. And in 20 years, that $200,000 is going to double to $400,000 a year. So if you're 65 and you're thinking, I can afford $100,000 a year, well, with inflation, that's going to be maybe $400,000 a year by the time you need it at age 85. And that's the number that you're trying to determine, can I self-insure for that? So I also did a quick little Google search earlier this morning to say, well, what are some guesstimates as to how long you might need to be in a nursing care situation? And the statistics vary widely based on age, gender, health history, things like that. So, somewhere between 7 and 26 months, 28 months. So your situation is very unlikely to be average. But what you can guess is that if you're going to need nursing care, it could run $400,000 a year by the time you're 85. And all you want to do it makes it sound kind of simple, and it's really kind of complex, and it's an emotional decision. But what you want to do is figure out, how equipped am I, based on the money I've saved for retirement? How equipped am I to pay for that long-term care if I need it at some particular age in the future? That's probably, that might be out of reach for most do-it-yourselfers. If you need some help trying to figure that out, you're probably going to end up talking to someone like us, and we're happy to walk you through that type of calculation, look at your assets, and try to figure out what are your alternatives for funding long-term care if you were to need it.
Love those additional questions that get brought up with that particular conversation. Again, the simple way is like, do I get it or do I not? And there's so many other ways that we can answer that and solve for that problem. So that's why we want to tweak that question just a little bit. Same on this next one. The common question is, how can I get the highest possible return on my money? I'm sure people come in with that kind of laser focus when they first start working with you, David, but there's some other ways we can approach that question.
Yeah, there are. It kind of brings to mind one of Will Rogers' quotes. It said it's less about the return on my money and more about the return of my money. And so that harkens to safer types of investments like bonds, money markets. But when I think about getting the highest return possible for my money, I think of people who are maybe a little too concentrated in any one particular stock. And then you think about stocks like Enron, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, even things like JCPenney and Toys R Us. Those companies don't exist anymore. So if you had worked for them, or you had a brother-in-law that worked for them, or you had a particular affinity for those stocks because they were going really well for a decade or more, and then all of a sudden the company doesn't exist anymore, that very likely means that your investment doesn't exist anymore. So I think the answer, rather than highest possible return on my money, is a significant amount of diversification will take away the event risk of losing most or all of your money on a particular stock. That usually then means some sort of diversified ETF or mutual fund. And then to further diversify, you might have allocations to large U.S. companies. And you're probably thinking about the S&P 500. A lot of conversations in my office say, well, yeah, Dave, but the S&P 500, they don't get this specific, but I can tell you right now, the S&P 500, the top 10 stocks make up 41% of that index. So if you buy the ETF SPY or VOO or a couple of others that mirror the S&P, you have 41% of that investment in 10 stocks. Well, there's also an ETF that is RSP that you would own 1/500th of each of those companies. So it's weighted by the number of stocks, not the market value of the stocks of the companies in that index. So diversification is important. Make sure you know how you're diversifying. You might say, well, I'd like some small cap stocks. That's probably a good idea. But from my chair, I think you'd want to make sure that you had profitable small stocks. So for instance, there's a dramatic difference between the Russell 2000 and the S&P 600. If you're a do-it-yourselfer and you don't know that difference, you should do some research and make sure that you do know the difference and that you're investing in the type of small cap ETF that you actually want to be invested in. There are lots of alternatives for non-US stocks, emerging market stocks, and then in bonds, which have less volatility, but probably have a place somewhere in your retirement portfolio. You're likely looking at investment grade bonds. And all that means is corporate bonds rated by the major rating agencies between AAA and BBB. That's an investment grade corporate bond. So diversification, if you don't diversify, if you have a portfolio that's heavily concentrated in one or two stocks, and they happen to work out great, you're going to feel really smart, and your portfolio is going to grow really great. But when one or two of those stocks turn on you, you're going to feel stupid and reckless. So diversification is a great way of taking volatility. You're not taking it out of your portfolio. You're reducing single stock volatility. So back to that question, after that very lengthy answer that I just gave, which I'll apologize for right now, but it's not a simple question. But trying to get the highest possible return on my money is a high risk, high volatility strategy. And the vast majority of retirees I'm working with are looking for lower volatility. And for that, they will accept somewhat lower returns because they tend to be safer.
I appreciate the lengthy answer because we get great details, David. So I don't think you ever have to apologize for that. That's what we're here for, right? To learn and understand and learn a little new nugget or two along the way. So, and I think we did there just over the last couple of minutes. So that's fantastic. By the way, if you've got any questions for David as we go through the show today or at the end of the program, and you want to talk a little bit more about your financial situation one-on-one or go through the retirement planning process with David, it's very easy to set that up. In fact, all you have to really do is click the link in the description of today's show. We've got a link to the website where you can go and find more information about working with David and the team and get all the details that you need there. So I'll definitely point you in that direction. The other option, of course, is to pick up the phone and give David a call at 913-317-1414. That's 913-317-1414. That contact info also in the show description. All right, so we're walking through these better questions you can ask to build better retirements. And the next one, David, is the basic question, where can I pay the lowest fees for financial advice? And I applaud the little bit of the sentiment there of like, hey, let's pay attention to what we're paying for the advice that we're getting and that kind of thing. But there's a little bit better way to kind of ask this question.
Well, I think so too. As a fee-based advisor, somebody's going to say, well, of course he said that. He's a fee-based advisor. But what I think you should do is make sure that you get the best value for the fees that you're paying. So a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. That is exactly my situation with my car. A lot of times with the electricity that goes on in my house. So I'm not trying to find the cheapest mechanic for my vehicle. I'm not trying to find the cheapest handyman when I really need a licensed electrician to do work on my house. So if you're a super duper do-it-yourselfer, then maybe you should pay nothing and do it yourself. I think the best example that I have to kind of answer this question, I have a friend who recently retired. He was really high up in an investment company, an investment management company, and they got bought out, and he did really well in that buyout. And in a conversation I had with him, I said, so I probably didn't say it quite this way, but I said, I assume you're just going to manage your own money. And what he said really surprised me. He said, well, I'm going to handle the passive investments. And I'm going to have another small pot over here that I'm just going to invest in stuff just to stay sharp. But I'm going to outsource more than half of my money to active professionals. I just want to be retired. And I thought, wow, I don't know why that surprised me, but it surprised me. So I think the bottom line and what he was really saying in that answer is don't take more risk than you have to accomplish your goals, which also means it's important to know what your goals are, your spending goals, your goals for the size of your nest egg when you're 70 and 80 so that you have a confidence in going forward, the goals you have for leaving a legacy. Maybe that's to your family, maybe it's to community things that are important to you or your church or your school. But to take on risk that you don't need to take on just to accomplish the goals that you can already accomplish with what you're doing, it's a fool's errand. It's a silly thing to do. And so understanding what you don't know and what you're not really willing to pay attention to in retirement, even though you could, that's really, really important. So as you're getting close to retirement, maybe you're in retirement, I just encourage you to figure out what is the best value, what makes you feel the most comfortable with the money that you've worked so hard to retire with, and then find a person that gives you the best value for the fees that you are going to be paying.
Yep, love that value question. What else in life do you go around just saying, give me that cheapest thing, right? Aren't we always kind of on the lookout for the value part? So let's not abandon that when it comes to then talking about our life savings and the advice we're getting and our portfolios and all that kind of stuff too. So keep value at the center, right? I like to always mention oysters on this one. I definitely don't go, where's the cheapest oyster I can find? I love oysters. Where's the cheapest one?
Walter, that is so good.
Right? Like, no, there's going to be better value in paying a little bit more for my oysters so I don't end up in the hospital.
So you're saying give your financial advice the smell test?
There you go. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. The smell test, maybe better than the taste test, I think.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
The taste test, it's a little too late.
Yes, that's a very good point. Yeah, the smell test, does it pass it or not? Absolutely. All right, we get to our last question on today's episode that we're going to make a little bit better, and it's a great focus, and I love the fact that somebody would come through your door already asking about this, but I know you're going to flip this one on its head just a little bit. What can I do to pay less in taxes this year? Oh, that must be music to your ears when somebody comes through and they're asking, like, how can I save money in taxes, right?
So it's a lot of what we do is to try to help people pay the least amount of taxes possible and still be legal. So I always kind of look back to this famous quote that every one of our listeners has heard to from Judge Learned Hand. It's about a paragraph, but it ends with, nobody owes any public duty to pay more tax than the law demands. Another way to say that is, I want to pay every penny of tax that I owe, but not a penny more. So when this question comes up in our office, what we try to do is focus them not on paying less taxes this year, but more on how can I save on taxes in future years, maybe even taxes for the rest of my life. How can I reduce them? Because it's usually followed by the conversation of, we're all pretty sure that tax rates are going up in the future as our debt situation in this country continues to worsen. So how can I set myself up better for the future? I can think of a couple of 4 different things that we usually discuss with clients in this situation. If they're still working, we do a calculation to figure out whether they should be contributing to their 401k or their Roth 401k. If they don't have a 401k at work, then should it be their Roth IRA or their just regular IRA? So everybody that listens to this podcast knows the difference. If you don't, go back. We'll probably put a link to a past podcast. But Roth or traditional is a question we always talk about when someone is still working, to say, well, are you better off saving taxes now or in the future? Your health savings account, you get a tax deduction this year for what you put into an HSA. It grows tax-free. And if you take it out for health care expenses, you take it out tax-free. So your HSA, if you're still working, that's an important thing to pay attention to, and it has future benefits. Roth conversions come up a lot when somebody either has retired early or they're retired, but they're not yet 73 when required minimum distributions kick in. So there are ways to do Roth conversions that are tax smart in the current year. And what they'll do in most cases, the reason we would do them in most cases is that it reduces the amount of required minimum distribution out of your IRA when you turn 73 and then going forward. Once you turn 73, the IRS basically has you where they want you. You have to take a certain percentage out of your IRAs and 401ks. You're taking your Social Security, maybe your spouse's Social Security. I'm sure you are, because there's no reason to not do it past age 70. And maybe you've got a pension. So all of that is pretty much fixed going forward. So before age 73 is when you get a chance to do Roth conversions that can be very tax smart going forward. And then the fourth thing that comes to mind is qualified charitable distributions. And all that is, it was, I don't remember which tax law. There have been so many over the last 6 years, but I think around 2019 or 2020, Congress said that if you want to give, instead of, or in addition to your required minimum distribution, but if you're over 70 and a half, you can take money out of your IRA, have the custodian, Schwab, Fidelity, whoever it is, send that money directly to your college, your church, any qualified institution. And that distribution out of your IRA never shows up on your tax return. That's really important if you're not itemizing, and the vast majority of Americans no longer itemize their taxes. So That you can do up to $100,000 a year per spouse, per IRA. And actually, that's indexed to inflation, so it's a little bit higher now. But it's a bunch of money that you can give away every year. And so it takes down your required minimum distribution, probably totally satisfies your required minimum distribution. You get to satisfy your desire to give, and you don't have to pay taxes on that money coming out of your IRA or 401k. So those are 4 different things that I can think of about how to reduce taxes in future years that may have very little to do with reducing taxes this year. Basically, Americans are living longer, and that means a lot more years that you're going to be paying taxes. And if there are totally legal ways to reduce that tax bill in the future, I think you'd want to know about them today and see if there are things you should be putting in place that can help you reduce future tax years.
Great points across the board there, David, and I will follow up just to say that back in episode 33, we had a nice breakdown of Roth versus traditional IRAs. So that was back in 2019, if you can believe it.
Oh, my God.
So we'll link to that. It's still alive, so people can check that out. We'll link to that since that's truly that conversation very directly about those 2 items. But we've done about 20 total, from what I can tell, about 20 total episodes that have something to centrally do with a Roth IRA. So we'll link to a couple of others in the description of the show. So just in case folks want to go poke around and quickly find a couple of more Roth topics, we'll include those links in the description for folks.
Love it. You are good, Walter. You are good.
We're at least decent at helping folks connect the dots and find more if they're interested. Speaking of which, that takes us to the end of today's episode, and we covered a lot of ground today talking about these questions that can, be asked in a different way to reveal more helpful information about a retirement plan. And it just brings me back to mentioning that if you do want to talk to David and the team at Creative One Advisors Group, it's very easy to do that. You can go through the complete planning review, the CPR process, as we like to call it, where you just really get a full look at your financial plan, a review of your situation, and you get to talk in specifics about your retirement goals and how to achieve them. You can contact David and the team in the ways listed out in the description of today's show, but that's also at creativeoneadvisorsgroup.com and 913-317-1414. David, good episode today. Thanks for diving into such detail, and we'll look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, Walter, to you.
That's right, next week.
And your wonderful growing family and all of our listeners. This is one of my favorite holidays, so hopefully we all take the opportunity to just slow down, think about all the things that we have to be thankful for.
So much.
And then, give somebody a hug. So I'll look forward to talking to you and everybody else early December.
Real quick, how you cooking your turkey?
Well, I'm an oven guy. I'm not a...
Oven, okay. So no deep frying, nothing like that.
I've smoked one once, and it was, pretty good. But I smoke a lot of meats, so I'm an oven guy. What about you?
I'm not a turkey guy, so we're actually, I like doing duck on Thanksgiving. So
really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but no one really likes my duck, so I only make it when it's me and Connie. So it's just us Thanksgiving this year. So we're just having a small little thing, just the tight group. So I said, hey, duck's back on the menu when it's just us. So.
Well, I have a funny duck story, but I'm not going to tell it today because it's lengthy. But
okay.
You would really chuckle.
Oh, let's do it though on a future episode. Please drop your duck story. I love it.
All right, we'll see.
Thanks, David. We appreciate it. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and we'll talk to you in December.
Creative One Advisors Group has been proudly serving families in the Kansas City metropolitan area since 2003. Over the years, we've evolved to help meet the needs of our clients, becoming KC Financial Advisors in 2010. In November 2021, our advisory business was acquired by Creative One Wealth LLC, C1W, and in January 2025, we officially adopted the name Creative One Advisors Group. Previous episodes were recorded under the branding of KC Financial Advisors, which has since been rebranded as Creative One Advisors Group. Any references to KC Financial Advisors should now be understood as referring to Creative One Advisors Group. Investment advisory services are offered through Creative One Wealth LLC, a registered investment investment advisor. Creative One Advisors Group is a DBA of Creative One Wealth. Insurance services are offered through licensed insurance professionals. Investment advisory services are provided in accordance with the fiduciary duty of care and loyalty that includes putting your interest first and disclosing conflicts. Insurance services have a best interest standard, which requires recommendations to be in your best interest. Creative One Wealth is not affiliated with or endorsed by any government agency and does not provide tax, legal, or estate planning advice or services. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. No investment strategy can guarantee a profit or protect against loss. Neither asset allocation nor diversification can ensure a profit or guarantee against losses. None of the information contained herein shall constitute an offer to sell or solicit any offer to buy a security or any insurance product. Insurance product guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing company. The Creative One family of companies includes Creative One Wealth LLC, a registered investment advisor, Creative One Securities LLC, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor, and Creative One Marketing LLC. These companies share common ownership. Additional details regarding advisory services are available in our firm's ADV Part 2A and Form CRS.